Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Josh.
It's good seeing you today.
Good seeing you. First time today.
Yeah, it is only, well, I guess it's not morning anymore.
It's not technically morning.
This always sneaks up on me so fast.
I know.
Where I'm like scrambling to get it all set up, and it still feels like 9 o'clock in the morning to me right now. It's not 12:30 in the afternoon.
That's right.
Yeah. And so I was absent the last 2 weeks because I had training, and I felt like I came back from this 1 hour training. One day training, 2 Fridays in a row, and felt like I just didn't belong here anymore. It was like this place worked without me enough, anyways. I like to think that a little bit of it didn't work without me.
It fell apart, Josh. It fell apart, but I didn't want you to worry, so I pretended it didn't.
Yeah. And then I show back up, and nobody comes and says hi because everybody's seeing clients working.
Got to keep it ship shape.
Whatever. Middle child problems.
Totally.
Yeah.
Made up middle child problems.
Made up. At some point, we're going to have to address your older sibling problems and the little incident that happened between us. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago?
I don't know. Was it every day that your middle child and my older child?
Yeah, you're going through your Rolodex of like,
wasn't it right now? And then
it was some moment where you let me do something.
Oh, I let you. That's right.
Which is probably every moment. But this particular moment, you decided to definitely point it out that you allowed
you
this
actually
to happen.
pointed out that I was being my older child was completely showing, even though I thought it was more conspicuous.
That's true. Which is very not middle child of me to do.
Maybe that's why it stands out.
I feel like I abandoned my inner child there for a minute.
Oh, go back to him. Go back to him.
Which is probably why you said, you see how I let you do that? Because you were honoring your inner child.
Ugh, that's so narcissistic. That's disgusting. Let's move on.
Okay. Let's move on to me.
Let's move on.
Back to me. Okay. So this is actually a good banter to have as we're talking about opposite sex friendships. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. For those of you that have tuned in, we're going to talk about the gist of what we're going to talk about is opposite sex friendships. Right. But it kind of started with this idea of, work wives versus work husbands. And then really what it boils down to is opposite sex friendships. And so we're going to dive into the complexities of that. So don't go anywhere. So welcome back, everybody, to Therapist Take. We're going to be talking about work wives and work husbands and basically opposite sex friendships and all the different complexities and nuances of those relationships. Before we begin, though, kind of just go through the housekeeping things or the kind of the typical run through of please like and subscribe to our channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to this on the audio platform, please make sure you follow us and give us a 5-star review. We also try to put a lot of resources in the show notes. So we mention the show notes a lot because we try to add a really good description of our episodes as well as valuable resources for people. And so try to make use of those show notes. And so, okay, did I cover everything?
I believe so.
All right. So back to the topic at hand. So real quickly, let's go ahead and put on the screen how we're going to break down this episode, and then we'll kind of dive into it. So in talking about opposite sex friendships and the complexities there, we're going to start out just by talking about the realities versus myths, so some things that are concerns are very real concerns, and some of them might be a little bit, overdone a little bit. So then we're going to do a comparative analysis of what is different about a same-sex friendship versus an opposite-sex friendship. And then just kind of answering the question, are opposite-sex friendships even important enough to have? Is it worth it or worth the trouble in a sense? And then if the answer is yes, we'll talk about the boundary nuances. So all the differences and how boundaries work differently in those types of relationships or how we think that they might work differently. So that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then we'll have all that wrapped up, and then everybody's friendships will be resolved. Any problems or
Everything's
as
clear.
always.
Yeah.
We only have probably like 3 or 4 more episodes to go before everything's fixed. And
I mean, really, that'll be nice. The world will be a beautiful utopian place.
yeah, I can't wait. 3 or 4. It's like 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe at most. If I have another training, I have to go to.
I know, bar
I
training.
can't be here.
Yep.
Yeah. So this all came about when I came to you, and I'm like, hey, I have a good idea for an episode.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? You know, I'm like, what about like work wives, work husbands? That's kind of how it started out, because we often referred to each other that way.
That's true.
But it's just kind of an interesting thing to say, and like most of the time when we say it, you know, there's chuckles with it. And
Right.
The
It's
first
a jest. Yeah.
right,
Mm-hmm.
and the first time I ever heard it was at a training where the speaker and one of the office administrators referred to each other that way, and I was like, that's it. I've just have never heard that before, but it makes a lot of sense, you know, in that. So
Yeah. I think usually people are talking about it as a joking thing, but also as a way to put some, like, I guess, parameters around. Yeah, it's a pretty important relationship, right? There's some working piece of this relationship that's important and significant, whether it's just for the work, right?
Right.
But probably also it feels like we can get stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Is there a discomfort to you? Like, to me, there feels like there's like this. That's what kind of makes me laugh at it a little bit. Is like there's some kind of strange discomfort, because husbands, wives, these are words that we have typically historically reserved for a very unique, intimate relationship, right? And so it's kind of being, you know, utilized in a different type of relationship, you know, and it's just kind of like, I think that's kind of what took me aback the first time I heard it, was like, is that okay to have is it okay to have a work wife? Is it okay to even say that, you know?
Well, yeah, and I hear it sometimes being used to describe people feeling threatened, like, oh, you got to take the call. It's the work husband calling. It's the work wife calling, you know.
Right.
And so I think sometimes it can be, you know.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, you know, how would my wife feel about, you know, hearing me have a work wife, you know? Of course, she refers to you and Rebel as my work wives anyway. So
really,
I'm like,
shared
okay,
language.
well, there's
shared
that.
language. Yeah.
There's that. You know, but in kind of breaking it down, though, like, I think what it boils down to is friendship. You know, like, you and I have been doing this since 2009 to some degree. I mean, we started Family Solutions 2011, but me and Rebel were doing this since 2009, but you and I have known each other since grad school. You know, so 2003 for me. Yeah, that's when I showed up. I think you were there a little bit before me, because you're a little older.
Friendship?
Friends, yeah. That's why we can do that. I think those terms are like reserved for people that they're more than friends, but they're not, there's not any kind of violation in terms of, you know, the marital vows or the sanctity of the marriage. It's kind of like a best friend that's of the opposite sex that you happen to work with at the same time. So there's kind of those pieces to it. And so, like, you know, there's intimacy in those relationships, you know, so they work together. They have they schooled together to some degree. They you know, like, dive into the research, and they win together, they lose together, you know, and things like that. And you and I have done that too. Like, I mean, we've been, what year, I guess, is this 15, year 14? Since, well, Family Solutions is 13 years, but we've been doing this since 2009, so that makes it 15 years that we've been
long time
winning and failing, and I don't know what the balance,
I don't
the
know.
ratio
Let's probably not do
is.
that math, right?
Yeah.
Let's just leave that.
But, you know, you know, so we go through stress together, you know, hardship, sadness, you know, and we get angry at each other at times, you know, and so it's a different type of friendship. You know?
I think even if people can reflect on different moments in their life, right? Like, someone that you went through college with, or someone that was you went through some
Sure.
kind of training program or whatever, right? That going through things together, whether it's building businesses or jobs or graduate school or whatever, that those shared experiences and they're the people that understand what it was like to be in all of those spots, like nobody else, even your best friends, right? Or your other romantic partners.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, there in our work that we do, especially like when we're specializing in betrayal trauma treatment and we're working with couples, one of the things that we have to do is, or that we eventually tackle, is what does a healthy opposite sex relationship look like, right? For people that are in heterosexual relationships, and so and that's something that we have to tackle, or we don't necessarily have to, but we see that it's important.
Yes.
Right. And so before we dive into that part of it, let's just address the question. This is kind of where the topic of the point of reality versus myths comes in. It's really tackling the question of can heterosexual men and women be friends? And I think you and I both agree is yes, because you and I are friends. But what is true about that concern and what is mythological? Like, what would you say? Let's start with truths. Like, what's valid about the concern?
Well,
or the statement.
I mean, I think that in addressing that, their form of intimacy of those shared experiences is unique, right? And so does that connector also then connect you to romance? Right? Because we all know that one of the things about falling in love and partnering up is shared experience, shared interests, right? And so I think that's just a truth, right? That seems, that's part of it, right?
Yeah. So, for example, nobody has ever married their childhood best friend, right? It's not true, right? I mean, yeah, people do that all the time.
Yep.
People, they're identified as best friends, and then they became more than that. And something too is like nobody has ever had an affair with someone who was a friend, right? Which is also not true, right? That happens all the time. No one has ever had office romance. Not true. That happens all the time.
Right.
So I can understand why the notion that men and women can't be friends comes into play.
Right.
You know, and I think some of it is also embedded in kind of a stereotypical understanding of men and what men are and who men are, and that all we're doing is, just looking for someone to have sex with or something like that, which, so our only interest in a female friend would be if we could take it to the next level, and that is not true at all, not even close to true, and so, but it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what gets focused on. And then therefore it's like, well, let's just play it safe. Men and women can't be friends.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just kind of easier to just put a hard boundary around it, right?
Path of least resistance. Just one less problem that we have to worry about. Right?
And this is something we talk a lot about, right, after betrayal trauma. And I think it is part of the recovery and the treatment plan, right? Because you can't go in a world where you just never, ever, ever have to interact, right, as a heterosexual with the opposite sex. And that's not the way the world works. And so to address that the myths and the realities, I think that's a really important thing for people to critically think through.
Right. Yeah. And there's another hard reality, I think, that we're going to have to address, which I think we'll probably address when we talk about the importance of opposite sex friendships. So I'll go ahead and throw it out there right now. And that is, let's talk about it this way. When it comes to your primary relationship being like your marriage or your whatever committed relationship you're in, is that relationship going to offer everything that you need, or when it comes to intimacy and relationships, is it realistic to think that that relationship will offer you everything you need?
Right. Right.
And I think most people will understand no in terms of same-sex friendships. I think most people will say, sure, like my marriage does not give me what my friendships give me, referring to, and typically they're referring to their same-sex friendships, right? But I don't know if people would answer it that way in terms of opposite-sex friendships, because it's going to make you think for a second of like, so my partner gets something from his or her opposite-sex friendship that I don't give them. Like, I don't know how I feel about it. It just sounds kind of strange, right?
Yeah,
like it's not.
It could feel threatening. It can feel like a reflection of something you lack.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It really plays on those insecurities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll come back to that here in a little bit.
Okay.
But so now let's kind of move into just talking about the comparison, like what is different about a same-sex friendship versus an opposite-sex friendship. I guess this is kind of where we're going with that, anyways, right?
Feels like it, yeah.
Yeah, that's the segue there. Is that what makes them different?
I guess I gotta think
You're
about
like,
it.
Josh, you should have asked me that.
No,
you
I know.
sent me the question before.
No. I don't want it to
I mean, I haven't thought about it either. I just was like,
Is
that'd
it
be a good
different?
question. I'm going to write this one down.
Is it different?
I think so. Like, okay, so one thing you and I have talked about too is like, you and I don't like go to the movie. I can't call you up, just go to the movies.
Sure, right. That's
right?
true.
But
That's
you and I
different.
don't even hang out outside the office really, mainly because we see each other every day. It's like,
Right.
it's like it might be the same reason why I don't want to work with my actual wife.
Yes, perhaps.
It might be the same reason why we don't hang out with our work wives or husbands after the
True. Maybe that's
the work day, maybe,
Yeah.
But like I do, like when I think of my best friends in the world, like you're probably at the top, but you're not the friend that I would like if I need to go out for a beer or something, like, or if I need, or if I'm just like, I want to go catch a movie or something and my wife's gone out of town or something, like, it's just, there's just we're going to get into boundaries here in just a minute, but there's just a boundary there, it's like, it's, mainly from my opinion, it's just optics, because I'm not really worried about anything else in that capacity, but it's mainly just optics.
I also think though that it is kind of like you said too about there's a rhythm, right? So
yeah,
if your opposite sex friends are kind of set in a certain place in your life, then that's kind of where so you've got your friends you golf with, right? Or you've got your friends you recreational sports with, or you've got, like, I've got my book club friends, like, right? Like, that's just where they are. And not that I don't like them, but I don't really go, have dinner with my book club friends outside of book club, right? So
right. Yeah.
that's so if you have your work friends,
Right.
you kind of see them at work, right?
Yeah.
So, and then my
And
other
sometimes
friends
it bleeds over. Right?
Sometimes, right. But I also wonder if sometimes one of the things that's happening is that those are just like the placeholders in a sense. That's where that exists.
Yeah. And do we really want to be hanging out with therapists after a day?
Aren't
of
we
therapy?
sick of ourselves enough? Yeah.
Like, I need somebody who just doesn't give a crap in my life.
Yeah, I need something who sees the world very differently.
Yeah. That's why I married a chemist. Black and white linear thinking.
Linear, A plus B is C.
Yeah. That's just wrong. I'm like, well,
let's take an arc of
let's
this.
look at that.
Oh God,
we probably annoy him to death.
We're so annoying. True.
Yeah. So I do think they're a little different. They are the same to some degree, as like, and just in terms of, I'd go to your funeral.
Oh, Josh, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd cry at your funeral.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good.
But just in terms of like when you're kind of analyzing who you trust, like,
right.
If and this is, we're going to talk about boundaries here in a minute, because what I'm about to say definitely is going to when you start down this road, you do have to have good boundaries, because typically when the friendship does fail in a sense of like the boundaries holding up, and then it became something that's not supposed to be, is when like you're not really being intentional with your boundaries. But so what I'm going to say is like when like if I was just needing someone to talk to, like you're a good person for that, but I'm not calling you up at midnight to talk to you. Like if you look at you and I, we have texted back and forth before, but we don't have hours and hours of text threads happening between us, because those are red flags, alarming type things, right?
Yeah.
Like, because now this, there is something happening there, and if you look at any of my friendships, my male friendships, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but with men, I know it's kind of more stereotypical toward women to have like the phone conversations and things like that, but there's not lengthy text threads with them either, especially about relational problems or just mental health or whatever it may be. Because also in some ways, like those are also red flags, not in the sense of that, like if my wife found I had been texting Joe, for example, like, like hundreds of text messages about our relationships, I don't think she's going to be worried that I'm into Joe.
Yeah.
But I think she'll be worried that I haven't come to her with these things, right?
Yeah.
So, but in that sense, like in terms of utilizing those friendships in that way, I do think there are some similarities there.
Well, and I
right?
think that all the friendships, opposite sex, same sex, contained in work or through an experience, they also offer support, right, and encouragement. There's a tone of, hey, I'm alongside you, I believe in you, I'll help you, right, and that's the same.
Yeah, that's a really important piece, I think.
It's a huge part of friendship, right?
And especially like your best friends, and so, which, to be honest with you, I think when we go back to the work wife, work husband thing, I think it's just another word for best, like it's just related to the context, right? You're my best female friend that I happen to work with, so you're basically a work wife, right? And that kind of reflects that when we think of friendships, like there are different levels of intimacy, right? That's why we have friends and we have our best friends, because the intimacy is deeper there. There's more love there. There's more connection, and so, but that is also true in opposite sex friendships. So I think we've kind of answered our question. You and I obviously think they're important.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if we need to dive into that too much.
It's clear.
Right.
We've placed our feet on one side of that line.
Yeah. So let's talk about the boundary piece of it then, like the nuances, because I do think like that this is where, where the path of least resistance comes in. People are just like, well, I guess men and women just can't be friends. Right. That's just, establish that right off the cusp and move forward, and I think that first of all, like if that's the way you want to do it, that's fine. You could do that, and I think you can go on to live a great, healthy, satisfying life, right? If you did that. But I do think like you might be missing out on just kind of a different part of friendship and a different part of life, because as much as I do think there is some friendship deficit with men, particularly. Yeah. And also being vulnerable with men. And I think men should be able to do that. I think men should be able to cry in front of each other. I think they should be able to open up. And I do think that's getting better to some degree. The way I always say it is every Frodo needs a Sam. Back to my Lord of the Ring references. But like there is a different, the feel of an opposite sex friendship is different. It's not, you're not just one of the guys to me, and I might be one of the girls to you, but you're definitely not one of the guys.
Well, that's what happens when you work in a female dominant professional world.
But in a sense, like it feels, it's safer in a sense, like. I don't have to feel like, I just poured my heart out, but I need to go ahead. I need to quote some sports stats real quickly, to kind of reestablish.
Maintain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole pulling your man card and things
Oh,
like
yeah.
that, and so I hope it's not, feeding in, like I'm feeding into a narrative by
Yeah.
accenting on the opposite sex friendship, so I don't have to, change the
I
bromance,
hope.
or really it's not bromance, just what do they call it? Like just kind of the bro type
The
relationships,
bro
right?
relationships, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's the first thing is kind of establishing that people, like it's a different type of friendship that has benefits to it that that are good quality growth experiences that you aren't going to get that from your marriages,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a good thing.
Well, and I think too, just to kind of go to one of our trainings, right, as sex addiction therapists, there's a treatment model called the 30 task model,
Mm-hmm.
right, by
Yeah.
Patrick Carnes. And he talks about one of the steps in the tasks is as part of recovery, right, from
Mm-hmm.
sexually compulsive behavior is to make and maintain opposite sex relationships, right?
Yes.
And the value in that too is, making sure that sexuality and attraction and desire isn't the only way that you relate
Mm-hmm.
to the opposite sex, right? That
Yes.
thinking about the theory of love, right? And
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I can't remember the person's name. I know I should know this basic
Mm-hmm.
undergraduate stuff, but that there's many components of love, and in friendship love, there's high commitment and high support,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the part that's not there is the romantic desire,
Yeah.
right? And so you should be able to have high commitment and high support for opposite
Mm-hmm.
sex people in your life. That's important to learn how to experience that being given and give it back to somebody
Right.
else too.
Yeah. But kind of to the point of, the first thing to establish is that you and I obviously and see these as important relationships, and probably the 30 task model is probably the first time I have ever really taken a step back to even think and consider the importance of it, because I just kind of bought into the cultural norm of that, men and women just can't be friends like that. But I do think that you have to have good boundaries in all relationships. So,
Absolutely.
and so, but the boundaries look different. I feel like, don't you?
Yeah, I think that they have to be more clear and maybe a little even more on the up and up, or
Right.
more, you can't slip as much, right? Like if I say I'm going to go have dinner with my friends for 3 hours and it's 4,
Right.
right? But if you know
Yeah.
that somebody maybe is doing something with an opposite sex person and it's past the
Yeah.
allotted or expected time, it may create more of a, suspicion or an anxious response,
Right.
right? And so, yeah, I think that there are things about that you have to keep those boundaries even more clear. If it's 3 hours, it needs to be 3 hours, right?
Right.
And that's not about control. I just want to make sure this isn't about control, right?
Right.
This isn't about being too obsessed about what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
This is about how you balance having different types of relationships in your life, right? If you're
Right.
going to have one type, you also have to accommodate another, right? It's just learning how to keep the plates spinning.
Yeah. So like kind of going back to the whole movie thing, like I say, like in, kind of off the top of my head, that it seems like it's more optics for me. But at the same time, like, if, we typically think of movies with an opposite sex person as kind of a date type thing, right?
Yeah.
You and I have had many lunches together in the middle of a work day, right? Because that's what work people do. They eat lunch together. They have business lunches. But unless you're like wine and dining clients, in some kind of corporate America thing, you typically don't do that in the evening. It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of our
Business
brains
hours.
associate that with something else. And so in a sense, like, yes, I do think it's like, I don't want, I wouldn't want my wife to get a call saying, hey, I saw Josh at the movies with Carrie. Of course, she would know about it because I'm not going to keep that secret from her if that happened. But I wouldn't want to create those type of optics.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, also wouldn't want to put me or you in a position of or our brains start associating our relationship with something else than what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I
So
think
it's just
that's-
boundaries, you know?
I think it is just boundaries. And I also think, though, that this may be a very personal, the boundaries may look very different for each person and
It's a very good
relationship,
point.
right?
Yeah.
Because I do think that if you grow up in a culture and in a place where there's lots of shared gender, mixed gender experiences, et cetera, that this stuff may feel very different than if you grew up in a place that's much more separate, right?
Yes.
From and have much more perhaps prescriptions around what's male, what's female,
Yeah.
and keeping those things separate, right? So I
also-
just also think when you look at kids, like
Mm-hmm.
kids, like children play with both genders, but they do also tend to associate a little bit more with their own when they're playing.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's both, right?
Yeah.
But so I think that we also have to be careful and allow couples, individuals, to really think about what those boundaries are for them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
There'll also be generational differences. too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
generational differences.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
But I do think I'm glad you brought that up, because if we're addressing, like, tips for people that are in opposite sex friendships, obviously we're gonna say, like, be intentional with your boundaries. Probably even more so than you might in a same sex friendship.
Sure.
Like, I don't typically think of my boundaries with my friends, even though most of them call me a line stepper. But if with opposite sex friendships, I don't have many. It's basically you and Rebel, and I feel like Hannah is right there on the friendship. I feel like we're friends, aren't we, Hannah? She's like nodding her head, so I'm supposed to say yes.
Right, but she also doesn't want to be a part of this. Yeah.
We're friends.
You're friends. You can drag her into it.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
We're friendly.
Friend enough.
Yeah,
Friendish.
friendish-esque.
Yes.
I feel weird now.
Yeah. Good job, Josh. Way
Like,
to put yourself right
Way
in
to
that
make that
spot.
awkward. Dang
Yeah.
it. But I think one of the biggest tips I would give people is talk about it
Yeah.
with your partner.
Yeah.
Like, whatever you guys establish is what it is, and be realistic with it, revisit it. If you agreed to, like, had a conversation about opposite sex friendships, and then you kind of maybe experienced your partner in one, and you had some weird, strange feelings about that, then talk about it with them. And so this is, that's where the deepest levels of intimacy come. And so don't throw those out the window because you don't want to be the jealous spouse, or like, this is what I agreed to, so for some reason I agreed to it, and I can't change that anymore. Like, there's some kind of binding contract.
Right.
So
That doesn't work.
yeah.
Well, did we do it?
I don't know. I think so.
I think we cured
I did want to say one more thing too, is that this conversation is mainly geared toward in thinking about people that are in heterosexual relationships or plan to be in heterosexual relationships. And, one thing that we haven't talked about, because primarily and mainly we don't have time to, is how this might look different in different other types of relationships, particularly with the LGBTQ plus community. And so, if people who are listening to this are comfortable in putting in the comments, like if you're a part of the LGBTQ community and you want to let us know, like, kind of how the friendship issue plays into your world, and where boundaries tend to break down, or like what are some of the different types of concerns that happen. Feel free to put those in the comments, and maybe we'll be able to have a dialogue about that. So
yeah, that's good. I'm glad you clarified that.
But yeah, so now I think we fixed it.
We did.
Yeah, I think it's
Good.
I knew there was a little piece
One
missing, but
more thing.
we've finished the puzzle. Life is better.
Life is better. Good. Everyone go have friends. Well,
Yeah.
But just to kind of summarize, having people that care about you and support you and root you on, that's really special.
Yeah.
We should make that a priority.
Yeah.
Right? We can find a way to do that. You can find a way to
Yes.
maintain these
Yeah,
things, right?
They're so important. And I know, like, one of the things that we work on a lot with couples is when they're kind of breaking out of these codependent type relationships is when they're starting to realize that my marriage or my committed relationship, it just can't give me everything that I need. It can't be the source for all things happy for me.
Right.
I need to take care of other things too. Like, what do your friendships look like? What do your hobbies look like? What are your, how are you doing in your career? Is your career important to you? Are you enjoying it?
Yep.
You know, and there's so many different pieces, your spiritual life,
Right.
your self-care habits, you know, your marriages and committed relationships can't give you all of that. Like it can only meet the need that is specific to a relational need for that type of relationship. But it can't give you what your friendships give you. It can't give you what your kids give you if you have children, you know, and so on and so forth.
And that's not anything falling short, right? It's the idea that we need a community.
Right.
And that's why we were designed and why we've tended to, as human beings, stay in groups, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for doing this today.
Yeah. Thanks for not being a training.
Thanks for letting me do this podcast, Carrie.
I'll let you do the podcast, Josh.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody back here next time.